Hello everyone, this is Defense Politics Asia and this is the summary for the day of 1081 for the 8th of February. So we're going to start off with the Kursk front because there's still the more active front line compared to the Kherson region, Zapadne region. So over at the Kursk front, we have much lesser reporting of fighting from the Russian side. They have fighting reported as Vertiklovo, Yuzhny, uh, Kazacha Loknia, and it's still important to note. Give me a second. It's important to note that these shellings, right? This reported as the forces, the server forces group of forces engaging Ukrainian armed forces. They have another paragraph that shows artillery and airstrikes. So artillery shelling and airstrikes. So these attacks over in Kazacha Loknia, Zaleshenka and Gogolevka, or even Suja, these might actually just be FPV drone strikes. So because FPV drone strike might be a more direct form of attack from the units, and is not considered part of the artillery or the airstrikes. So this is just something to note because or else it's very hard to draw the arrow, to believe that the Russians attack, in this way. It's just not possible. These are probably just FPV drone strikes, and this is just being reported as such, which is rather confusing, I would say. So anyway, but as you can see, there's a lot lesser. Like the entire northern flank, just there's no more fighting being reported. Even on the west, we only have Yuzhny as well as Vertiklovo. Geolocation of FPV drone strike on a Ukrainian tank at Zazulevka, and around where the Ukrainians have attacked. Russians attacked Komalkov as well as Suja, which probably just shelling. Rybas claim, this one I've already done it, so I just grade this out. I've already done it in the previous SITREP. So the lack of attack might be related to the offensive by the Ukrainians, which I put it as successful now. Previously at the beginning, I put it as semi-successful because it's uncertain if the Ukrainians actually managed to capture the grounds, or they just retreat entirely. But because after that, we do have the geolocation confirming Russian Ukrainian advance. Oh, what happened to this? Why this one didn't change? Or did I forgot to change the mapping? So give me a second. Yeah, so the Ukrainian captures of this area here, and they landed troops around this forest. So now the Russians are more concentrated on dealing with the Ukrainian attack in this area here. So that basically kills off a lot of the Russian operations around Kursk region. So let's move on to the, so that's all from the Kursk front. We go on to the Kharkiv front. So over at the Kharkiv front, we have fighting being reported at Lipsy, according to the Russian Defense Ministry, whereas the Ukrainians talked about Voschansk. So this is the pretty common fighting reported at Kharkiv front. Nothing particularly special about these areas. Over at at Voschansk, there is another TOS strike on Ukrainian position being geolocated, reported by military summary in this aggregate plant region, but that's all. This area has already been super flattened, so yeah, the fighting there is pretty meaningless. Over in the Voreshna front, at the Voreshna front, we have new geolocations around Zapadne. So that leads to some frontline change, which we'll talk in a while. Russian Defense Ministry mentioned Monachynivka as well as Kinderashivka in their reports of fighting. So which means the Russians are now pushing out from Zapadne and Kalinove, whereas in the Zapadne region, we have geolocation of Russian forces in newer locations. So these two geolocations result in frontline changes over on the western part of Zapadne and the eastern part of Zapadne, so leading to further frontline changes and Russian expansion of their control around Zapadne. And particularly this one is heading in the direction of Monachynivka, which is around here. So Russians are attacking in this direction. So yeah, so that's all for now. So this is definitely looking like the front, the more exciting front right now in the Ukraine war. So something to really look out for. Nothing much over in the Topoli region, or literally nothing. Over in the Kupiansk front, we have fighting reported at Petropavlivka, according to the Ukrainians, and Zagoryukivka, according to the Russians. So the fighting is mainly over in the northern side of the Kupiansk front, but that's all for about it. Over in the Borova front, we have fighting reported at Zarizove, according to the Ukrainians. Novokrylyakivka was mentioned by the Russians, as well as Zeleny High, whereas Novoyehorivka is mentioned by the Ukrainians. So in combination, we have fighting reported across the usual suspects around at this Borova front. So that's all from the Borova front. Nothing particularly stands out. Over in the northern flank of the Liman front, we have fighting reported at Novi, probably coming up from Ivanivka and Novolyubivka. So the information is coming from the Russian Defense Ministry and the Ukrainian Defense Ministry respectively. Further south, over the Liman front itself, we have fighting reported at Yampolivka, which is mentioned by the Ukrainian Defense Ministry at Braiba. Braiba reported these frontline changes, which we have already covered yesterday. So that's all. Nothing new over at this front line. Over the Sivas front, we have mention of Dronivka by the Russian Defense Ministry, probably shelling reports, not particularly like an offensive, because the front line is not known to have changed in that way. And Zvenivka was mentioned by the Russian Defense Ministry. So it could be an attack from Vimka, but that's all. Nothing else around in Sivas. Over in the northern flank of the Bakhmut front, we have Minkivka mentioned by the Russian Defense Ministry, Varyolubivka as well. The Russian Defense Ministry also mentioned Izevka, which is probably just shelling. Varyolubivka, we can still possibly imagine there's some movement, troop movement in the direction, whereas there's also a Minkivka. Chasivya is mentioned as usual by the Ukrainian Defense Ministry. So that's about it in Bakhmut. But generally, don't expect too much. I think even Varyolubivka, this is probably just some drone strikes and something like this. In the southern flank, only Bilohora was mentioned by the Ukrainian Defense Ministry. That's all. Steposhki and Preteshny usually was mentioned, but it's not mentioned in the past 24 hours. We move into the Thorax front. At the Thorax front, we have mentioning of Krimsky by the Ukrainians as well as Thorax. Although both of these is already claimed to be captured by the Russian Defense Ministry, so that's why it's not mentioned. This is already reported. And then Eskibinivka was mentioned by the Russian Defense Ministry as well as Kalinove by the Ukrainians. So I need to change the color for this. So the Russians are attacking Krimsky, Thorax, Skibenivka, and Kalinove. Kalinove is something interesting because there is no reports of Kalinove fighting since the 4th of December last month. So 2 months ago. So this is a pretty new offensive operation, at least reported by the Ukrainians. It's not. I don't think this is going to be meaningful because of the heavy entrenchment and the lack of strategic purpose to attack in this direction. So I'm not going to put much mind into that. In the northern flank of the Pokrov front, we have mention of Zelenopole by the Ukrainians. Vodene Druhi was mentioned by both sides. Yelizavetivka by the Ukrainians and the Novotoreksky also by the Ukrainians. So Russians are literally pushing in all directions. If you believe the Ukrainians, so that's about it in this sector. No strategic change in this area here. Over at the Minokhrad sector, we have mentioning of Promin by the Ukrainians, Lysivka by the Ukrainians, and Pokrov by the Ukrainians. So the Ukrainians are reporting most of the Pokrov front offensive. There's really nothing much to talk about. This is a static line. We move into the Pokrov sector. We have multiple reports all across here. Pischany by the Ukrainians, Kotliny by the Russians, Zvirove by the Russians, Udashny by the Ukrainians, Uspenivka by the Russians, and Novo-Olesedrivka by the Ukrainians. So this continues to be the main push by the Russians, with fighting reported in towards Pokrov, Pischany, Zvirove, Kotliny, Udashne, Uspenivka, and Novo-Alexandrivka. So pretty much more or less the same thing. This image doesn't look like anything to me. So you can tell me what is this. But anyway, moving further south in the southern flank, Nadievka was mentioned by the Russian and Ukrainian Defense Ministry. Preobrazhenka was mentioned by the Ukrainians. Zaporizhia was mentioned by Deep State UA because of their mapping of frontline change in that sector, similar to Stripne, and then Slovianka was mentioned by the Russians. So the Russians are pushing at Nadievka, Preobrazhenka, Zaporizhia, Stripne, as well as Slovianka. The frontline change, however, is over at Stripne and Zaporizhia. With the Russian forces geolocated at this grocery store as they need to buy some handy plus because they got shot. And then so the Russians are moving in this direction. Ukrainian mapping mapped it a lot more than I do, with Russian forces entering into the eastern part of Zaporizhia in their mapping. So this is the attack moving into Zaporizhia. So that's all from the southern flank of the Pokrov front. And we move into the Andriivka front. At the Andriivka front, there is frontline changes from the Ukrainians. Another very weird frontline change, which I will zoom in a while, mentioned by Deep State. The fighting also mentioned by the Russian and Ukrainian Defense Ministry. Shevchenko is also mentioned by both. Dashne also by both. Constantinople is mentioned only by the Ukrainians, and Roslev is by the Russians. So we have this continued fighting in the Battle of Andriivka. Shevchenko was mentioned. Dashne, Ulakli is not mentioned at all. Interestingly, the fighting is only mentioned at Constantinople and Roslev. So I'm not sure what is the status here right now. So interesting to think about. And in Andriivka itself, if you zoom in, Ukrainian map that the Russians have gained these grounds in this attack, which, like I say, this is super weird. Like, this don't make any sense at all. Like, am I supposed to believe that there is some Ukrainian elements like this, and the Russians just encircle them? Like why not they just attack like this? No, I'm not sure. I don't think this is just reality. I think the Ukrainians are coping. I think the Russians have already taken all these grounds. So this is just some weird mapping that don't make much sense to me. So that's all from the Andriivka front. Over in the Velika Novosilka front, there is frontline changes over at Novi Koma, whereas at Novopil, Russian and Ukrainian Defense Ministry mentioned Russian attacks in this direction. So otherwise, let's zoom in into Novi Koma. Geolocation of Russian forces in the northern side of Novi Koma confirmed that the Russian mapping is correct, that the Russians have advanced in this sector. The only left this part is not mapped as Russian in our mapping, but most likely this is under Russian control. As anyway, the Russian Defense Ministry did announce the capture of Novi Koma since the 19th of December. So, and then we move on to the Zaporizhia front. At the Zaporizhia front, there is only one report of fighting over at Huyaipole. According to the Russian Defense Ministry, they attacked Ukrainian positions near Goyaipole, so which is over here. So some attacks, but yeah, we don't have much more other details. So that's all from that. And then that's all from Zaporizhia front, and we move into the Kherson front. Kherson front, we only have shelling reports by the Russian Defense Ministry. We have shelling at Dniprovsky, Sadove, Tokarivka, and Mykolaievka. So basically just these few locations, and that's about it. And this is the summary for the day of 1081 for the 8th of February. So do check out the DPA Open Mic. We have some very awesome, well-mannered, interesting discussions. Do check it out. If you like geopolitics, you like to make friends who would share your interest in geopolitics, war and military stuff, or politics or cultural stuff, then I think you will enjoy DPA Open Mic. Over time, you'll find that everybody is just friends and family. So do check it out, and I'll see you guys in the next update.